Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live, something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for smarter building. So it's really great to have you with us today. In case you're wondering who we are, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org. And also just to point out the views expressed here on this call are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do post questions and comments on chat to make this as interactive as possible. It's always better that way. And this slide deck is on mondaylive.org also if you need it. So this being January 2025, we've been talking around the theme of Who Moved My Cheese. It's been quite interesting, very interesting so far. So hopefully we'll continue that. Our agenda, as normal is news and trends and chit-chat about what's going on in the industry, then onto the topic. And today we really want to talk about how does the cheese get moved? How do we move the cheese? How does the cheese move? And so looking forward to that discussion. But before we do that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Ken Sinclair for an update from Automated Buildings. Hey, Ken.
Thank you very much, Anto. We, like everybody, are hard at trying to get our AHR programs together. They're coming together quite well. As always, we start off with our themes in July, and then by the time February rolls around, they need some modifications because the industry has changed. And I think there's probably been more change in the last 6 months in the industry than we even normally see. Our main feature on the slide is who controls the cheese, which was our discussion last Monday. There's a summary there with a link to that actual session. I think it's a great theme, and I'm looking forward to where we're going to go with it today. Another common theme in the industry that seems to be popping up all over is this talent and tech and just the shortage of talent. So we've got a rewrite there, and that, of course, ties back to the AHR program. So we're doing a bit of pre-spin on that. A couple of our sponsors have been writing interesting articles. This one, have you thought about hiring top-notch freelance? And I think because we're so short of people, this is another moving cheese scenario. That we're looking to get people who actually have expertise in exactly what you need expertise in, and the idea of hiring a collage of people rather than just one or two. So that's an interesting article. And then there's another one written by someone in the training business, labor shortages in building automation, and they're talking about just the time to train is no longer tolerable. Our history in the past, we used to kind of try and teach our people by osmosis. Osmosis is not an option. You have to go into active training, and we have to use all the tools that are available to us. And other articles on the site, talent shifting in the age of AI. AI is completely changing the talent that we use. The talent that we keep moving down to get younger people. We thought that was a detriment. It's turning to be an advantage because they come with AI skills and a completely different way of doing it. To kind of add some context to that, we've got an article on how to become an AI engineer. I actually popped that one out last Monday, but it's interesting because in becoming an AI engineer, which we all have to, there are a bunch of requirements and just a better understanding. And I found the curriculum was helped me understand what is necessary to be an AI engineer. Again, other posts, FM versus AI. The obvious thing that don't you worry about your job. If you know anything about what it is we're talking about, you're going to be busier than ever because now we got this incredible machine, that AI, that is able to recognize problems and opportunities that were never there before. But physically, somebody has to go out and replace the fan, change the controller, and there's going to be a flurry of the need of the people, what we call the feet on the ground people. So we need to also understand that. Another thing that popped into my mind is, one of the advantages of being in this industry for 50 years is you get to see a lot of change. And when I started in 75, late 80s in the DDC industry, we had problems trying to convince people that this DDC stuff was going to catch on. It was expensive, it was cumbersome, and it wasn't as slick as it is now. And eventually we had to go through a stage, and we called it the dinosaur tipping stage, where we had to take traditional people who were in the pneumatics industry, just completely tip them over or completely ignore them and just replace them with younger people. And I think we're very much at that stage right now with AI. Move that along and 30 years in DDC, and then I ran into this thing called the internet, and that was the start of automated buildings. And again, that was another shift. And again, we had people who wanted then hang on to their DDC systems and didn't want to change. They didn't want to go to IP controllers and things like that. So there was again a division, and more dinosaur tipping was required. And so we started automated buildings, and I've put a link to the metamorphosis of a digital dinosaur. That's me 20 years ago, 26 years ago. So I think you kind of see there's a pattern developing here, and we're very much back into the dinosaur tipping, or dinosaurs are heavy. The easiest thing is just step around them, put a team of young people together and move ahead. It's my advice to the industry. Back to you, Anto.
Yeah, talking about education and training, I was chatting on some topic with someone last week, and as part of the conversation, they said, "Oh yeah, if you want to do that, you have to go for a week-long training." Right, and my mind just went somewhere, went to the sort of the time when we used to, go and huddle in some Holiday Inn somewhere in the middle of nowhere to do training, either to train or to be trained. And I wondered whether that kind of stuff happened today, but obviously it doesn't. So just we live in different times, so very interesting. Thanks, Ken.
The other thing is the AI is so inherent training.
Right.
It just basically it leads you to ask the next question, and then it answers it, and all of a sudden, and it's basically doing it to your tune, not to somebody else's tune. So it just changes everything.
Yeah. So moving on, HR ASHRAE is obviously coming up in 3 weeks now. We're all focused on that, I'm sure. I'm going to hand it over to Rick to tell us about the activities there.
Well, great. As you see on the screen, we're going to be doing the Smarter Summit starting on Sunday at 3, and then
I have the agenda for that on the next slide. Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead and bring that up, I guess. I guess sort of the theme was going to be an update of what's happened over what C4SB and Monday Live have been talking about for the last couple of years, and an update on some of the things that have been happening. But the general theme will be that we are now into an acceleration of interoperability standards and open systems. And we'll have examples of some of the things that Ken has been talking about, for instance, of what's happening in the industry. And what we've been focusing on as C4SB to help accommodate that acceleration and to stimulate it further. And a big part of what we're going to talk about at Smarter Summit will be the Linux Foundation and the announcement of how C4SB is being acquired into the Linux Foundation, what that'll mean for the buildings industry. We'll also talk about the examples of how open source has impacted other industries and how that accelerates business for some and frankly is a pain for others, and that again, examples of how by following the example of open source and standards, it can have a real positive impact on your profitability. or a negative impact on your profitability, depending on whether you decide to take that path or not. And we're going to be fairly aggressively showing that owners, we talk about the voice of the customer there, and we talk about different vendors, and we'll have demonstrations of the IBB and some other Linux-based projects. And we're going to be fairly aggressive about saying that it's time to, it's possible now to adopt these principles and to leverage these capabilities to do more of what customers want and more of what makes your business or your career profitable. So that's a real quick overview of a slide that has way too many words on it. Got to get ChatGPT to get that slide to have fewer words. But that's the Smarter Summit, and then we'll be doing a Super Bowl watch party. A group of whoever wants to join. We're trying to get some money together to be able to pay for a round of drinks or so. But we'll be in the lobby of the Rosen Center Hotel, which is right adjacent to the convention center. So we'll either be at the lobby bar, and you'll know where that is when you see it. Trust me, it's massive lobby and it's a massive bar, or the bar that's right outside on the pool deck, depending on what the weather is like. So that's where we'll be for the Super Bowl. And what are we down to? What? I don't know, 4 teams that potentially have a chance to be in the Super Bowl. And we won't talk about who some of those are. Save y'all some pain and anguish.
Yeah. Don't worry, Kansas City will lose. Oh, just saying.
And the booth 1190. Tracy, you want to speak to that a bit? What's going on there?
Sure. The details are coming together. We have graphics and so forth put together. We still need some detail work on some of the demo stuff, but it'll be a great opportunity for people to come by and talk through a lot of this stuff that we've been discussing and will discuss between now and then, as well as see some of this stuff live in action.
Cool, that's great. And the rest of the time there with sessions and the IBB workshop on Wednesday. To register for the summit, head over to smartersummit.org. I've put that link on chat. Make it easy for us all. So looking forward to that. That's the agenda, the link board as always. Any other thoughts anybody want to bring up before we move on?
We'll say that watch for Kennedy Gales, who a lot of you know, will be sending out a LinkedIn or a social media snippet, with a come to the summit, come to AHR, but look for a Kennedy Gales post that you can then repost on your social media, and let's have a good turnout and have a good time.
When will that be happening?
She's working on it as we speak. So
Okay.
hopefully today. Yeah, today
Super.
was.
Oh, great. Good. Actually, we were just talking about that earlier. We need to get on with promotion.
Yeah, and that'll also be on the C4SB page on LinkedIn and IBB page and Monday Live page. So it'll all get distributed that way. Great.
Super.
Cool. So who moved my cheese? And again, just a reminder for people that are not familiar with all of this, this is based on the book, Who Moved My Cheese. Here's just some of the quotes, the kind of provocative quotes, obviously, intended to make us all think, which is what we've been doing all month. The book is about these 4 characters. So I had AI create this image, just sort of imagining that they're really sort of part of this conversation that we're having here. But the specific question that we want to ask is really about moving the cheese. I think the last couple of weeks we've been talking about the impact of the cheese being moved, right? Cheese, last time I checked, don't move on their own. My wife's just given me a slice of cheese, somehow moved my way. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, so how is it best to move the cheese, and how do we sort of think about it moving. And I'm going to bring on Mike Bordenero, who has been a guest on Monday Live before, talking about assets. And I'd like him to start this conversation when he joins us here in a moment. There he is. So, Mike, where are you?
Hello.
Hello, Mike. Good of you to join us here. You and I were on a call a week or two ago, and we were talking about cheese because you used the sort of what we've been talking about here as an excuse to bring it up on that other call, and we sort of went down the path of sort of linking the moving of the cheese and policymakers and asset sort of leadership. Could you sort of opine on all of that? And
Sure. Thanks for asking me to join today. And I got to tell you, I've been fascinated with the discussion this month. I did not like the cheese concept because of a number of reasons, but your first discussion was fascinating. You all did an excellent listing of how technology is changing and the way that we're working is changing and how that's impacting the way owners and consultants and engineers and everybody interacts. And you guys got me back into it. And I realized it's not who moved your cheese, it's effing move the cheese already. And it's the owners that we have to say it to. And so I was really encouraged by Rick saying about it's going to be an aggressive discussion about what is possible. And then the concept of learning these days, it's got to be a learn by doing activity because the tools that we have, I'm holding up an iPad, our cell phones, we can just get people to start doing things right now. And you don't need a week because you don't have to know how the iPad works. You don't have to know how the cell phone works, the smartphone. You can just start using it. And so what you're doing is showing there will be a few owners there. And some of the large manufacturers are owners also who have assets and need to use some of these processes in their own manufacturing. And they're probably even using manufacturing processes that are more advanced than the building processes that operate the buildings are. So it'll be a great discussion of saying the cheese has been moved. What do you want to do? You can come join us and exercise these options. And I'm really looking forward to being there, not just because it's 6 degrees in Chicago right now, but because I think that what the IBB represents is a consolidation of theories into a product. And people have a hard time understanding the theories, but if they can buy a box that helps them achieve a certain advancement, they're more psychologically ready to buy a product than theoretical concepts. So
Mike, talk about the sort of the asset and policy sort of angle of that.
All right. So once you get people to say, all right, we need to move our cheese, we see what you're doing and that makes sense to our organization, then the owners need to realize that this is not an incremental benefit. What you're presenting is a transformation, and transformations cannot occur in bits and starts. They need to be launched with full support of top leadership so that the full impact can occur. And that requires policy. so that if leadership or people changes, the policy is still in place and that organization is still going to operate the way the policy has been set up. And then you need a strategy, which in the asset management world is a strategic asset management plan on how you're going to implement this policy. And that's what the workshop on Sunday can do, is start showing how your strategies should be shaped, because you didn't even know this was possible. Now that you know this is possible, what does that do to your business process? And they need to start adjusting their business processes, because when someone can take a picture, one of our members is launching a assessment AI tool. So you can send somebody around with a camera and take pictures of tags and equipment and feed it into AI, and it will give you a database and it will give you an initial assessment of that piece of equipment. So now you can have a monkey go take pictures. You don't need to have an engineer walking. That's a whole different change to your HR or your staffing or your consulting. And the ripple effects that the IBB has throughout the organization need to be understood so that they can adjust appropriately.
So policy is the cheese, right? And really the bottom line of our conversation was that if you want to change behavior of the organization, there's only one class of people that can do it, and that's the leadership, C-level, typically, by policy, and that policy moves the cheese from some old cheese to some new cheese. So
that's one way of looking at it for sure. Another way is to look at it is the IBB is the new cheese that's been moved. That's the cheese that moved. And now leadership has to react because this cheese now exists that did not exist before. And for leadership to react, the first thing they should be doing is policy. Well, after they understand, what's possible through the workshop, then they have the knowledge and understanding to say, okay, here's how the policy can adjust.
So Rick, does that line up to the new shiny object that you often speak about? Ultimately, we need to create some change, and you're muted, by the way.
You're muted.
Yeah, Mike, well, good, because what I first said was totally inappropriate. No, absolutely. But what Mike is describing of executives need to see that it's possible. Once they see that it's possible, they'll go change policy. Oh gosh, possible and policy. And they also to see that it's going to be something significant. So one thing I'm telling you, executives don't like doing little things, or at least the executives that we want to talk to. They don't care about little incremental things. Now, there are people on this call that'll talk about the retirement syndrome, or the people that are watching their watch, just waiting for the time when they can retire. And our industry has a lot of that. But the youngsters that are coming up behind those dinosaurs that need to be tipped out of the way are looking for something that is dramatic and something that is significant. And they want to become the new leadership of the company, or maybe they've already been promoted to be the leadership. And so they have to see what's possible. And that's where showing the IBB, it's got backing. That's where I think the Linux Foundation backing of what's happening with the IBB is significant. And they have to see that it's going to be an important and a big thing, like what Ken's been talking about relative to the change from. It has to be that they see that it's as much of a change as DDC pneumatics to DDC transition. Which, by the way, how's that transition going? Is it
Still not done.
still not done?
We call it NINDY, NINDY. No, it's not done yet.
Good one.
Relative to the IBB, and really, and the Lennox Foundation specifically. So if I'm talking to the C-suite, the asset managers and people at that level where the policies are made, just saying the phrase IBB, I feel like you've lost them right out of the gate. Okay. If you say Lennox Foundation, that's my next question to you. Some may have heard of it. Do you think most or very few will have heard of the Lennox Foundation?
So the good news is, and we'll talk about this at the summit, is that most people have not been able to avoid the Harvard Business Reviews and the different articles that have been talking about how industries are being impacted by the Linux Foundation. So in our industry, it may still be a little bit of a secret, and absolutely there's some really important people in this industry that are still just kind of waking up to the idea of, hey, there's this other alternative, and that's what we're.
My question was really specifically to Mike. Are you seeing, does the phrase Lennox Foundation have any meaning at the C-suite?
So none of these words are going to just magically open things up.
Right.
What we are selling, and this is, so all the technology is great, but the one thing that's great about this group is everyone understands that it is a human behavior issue that we're addressing. It has nothing to do with technology. That's why we're talking about cheese, because it can be anything.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're selling is benefit.
Right.
And
So,
when people buy into benefit, then you can do the next thing, and everyone will agree with benefit. Yes, we want something that's going to help us do better. Then you sell them that there are technology tools that are developing today that people don't even know about, and you've got to be ready to be adjusted for them. And so human behavior is, you've got to be ready for open standards. And then well, that's why I was late to this meeting. I had it set for Eastern time instead of my Central time. Anyhow, so it's a whole process of the sales pitch.
Yeah.
And we're not selling Linux, we're not selling IBB.
Right.
We're selling that they're going to be able
selling a
to do
benefit.
something better.
Right. So as part of today's discussion about how the cheese gets moved,
Yes.
I've been last couple of weeks been advocating that I think it's primarily because of technology, and the area, the two letters that I would recommend we strongly talk out and consider are A and I. I watched the NVIDIA CEO's presentation from CES last week, and frankly, I was blown away with how fast and how sophisticated AI has become with generative capabilities. It's just mind-blowing. And I don't think there's a C-suite of any size that isn't being pressured to answer the question how they're using AI to improve their business right now. And so if it's logical to improve the business, and then it would seem to be logical that if you have facility assets, that what are you doing with AI to improve the operation of your facilities? It's a simple, leap to go from one to the other. So my recommendation is that's the horse we hop on. And when we get around to answering the question how, then we can talk about the IBB, and we can talk about open source and the Linux Foundation and all that, because that answers how. But the reason is AI, because the benefits are being realized by company after company after company in running their business, in all regards, headcount, training, efficiency, you name it, right? And so if that's proven true as it is, and the pressures on all these boards to answer the question by the board to the executives, what are you doing with AI? Then it would seem to me that's the easiest putt to take on with regard to facility side, is talk to approach it from the AI perspective, and then laying out our solution using AI through what we've talked about on the specifics.
So I agree with you that AI is mind-blowingly transformative.
Yep.
And that's the something that's really important. And luckily for you, you've got Onuma Inc. involved in your presentation.
Mhm.
And I think that it is not AI. AI represents technology. So your first thing I agree with. It is technology.
Right.
And for technology to provide you the greatest benefit, you need to have a policy to use secure open standards.
Right.
And if you have that policy, then you can improve the operations of your facilities. Here is how IBB and digital twins and BIM, if you want to think of that as something as different than digital twins work. And by the way, Onuma Inc. incorporates AI into the way they manage all the information. And that's is how it's done. We take the work orders that are now possible on a level that weren't possible because we're using these open source technologies. And now you run 40,000 work orders through AI, and now you've got predictive maintenance. That's what Kimon is actually doing right now. So it's baked in.
So
Yeah.
AI was the sort of the motivation behind the argument that we made at RealCom last June. It's the fact that AI is obviously widespread and has huge impact. And when we think about AI in buildings, we start to think about the data that's necessary for AI to function, and that then becomes the sort of part of the argument about doing things differently. Sort of continuing that argument, then Jim, can we bring you into this conversation, because you've sort of, I know that you have a lot of sort of thinking in this.
Yeah, so I do think that AI is transformative, but fundamentally, something that Mike said at the beginning of the conversation interested me the most, which is that we need to get the owners to understand where the cheese is moved to. And fundamentally, I view Mike's business as being a point where enterprise value, asset value is transferred to the owner. And a lot of these other technologies are enabling technologies along the way to that. The problem is that, I'm playing on something that Rick said too, which is that we're looking for decision makers that want to do big things. And one of the problems I've always struggled with in this industry is how we define big things, right? A lot of the decision makers that are out there want to do things so big that they don't have anything to do with buildings and facilities, right? Because those aren't big when it comes to the core of their business, unless they're a real estate investment trust or something in buildings. So I'm really trying to juxtapose the two things that Rick said and that Mike said about how do we get to those people that are interested in big, and how do we get those owners to move the cheese to actually partake in a lot of this value that we've just spent the last 30 years creating, of which AI is an accelerant, but not a, let's say it's another way of creating value. It's not the only way of creating value. It's a wonderful, very powerful tool, which we should use to lever ourselves forward. But there's a lot of value in this space to start out with that we've struggled to get people interested in. I want to get to the root of that.
So I've been challenged with that, and my movement to the Asset Leadership Network helped me. I told you in, I think it was September, that I had hit the glass ceiling of facility vice president.
Right.
And you got to get to the C-suite, and then you're starting to talk to the right people. But how do you get to the C-suite you've got to talk to the vice president of facilities and get that person interested in pitching to their C-suite. It's rare that
Right.
you get right there. So we are telling a multi-level story that we've got to have different scenarios for, depending on whether we're talking to the owner directly, or if we're talking to someone who's pitching to the owner, or we're talking to somebody who's a consultant who wants to be in front. There's all different things, but the end result is always benefit the owner.
Right.
So
Now-
as long as we're always talking about benefit the owner, then we can meet eye to eye with the person.
Right. And Rick, to your point too, you've said you've found it relatively easy to get to where you need to go when it comes to telling this story. Maybe it's not easy, but you've been able to overcome those hurdles in certain verticals, right?
Yeah, and I guess I should keep it more of a secret that it's easy. But when you've got a really good and a big story to tell, and you know that you've got the support of the facilities and you've got credibility to be able to deliver something big, and you've got the army waiting, that it is not that difficult to navigate to the C-suite, whether that's in public or in private organizations. And that's, but again, it's a function of having actually something that's really interesting to them, that's big enough, it's positioned big enough. I agree that what Steve is describing of AI is on everybody's mind, and we need to tie that to the arbitrage opportunity of, like, if you were to use AI for your facilities, it would equal $10 a square foot per month, and then, so we've got something big to talk about. We've got the credibility, and we've got the ability to get the attention. So said the how easy it is to get the attention of a C-suite is in a big part dependent on what you've got to say. And our story is actually big enough now. And we've got the ability to deliver. So that's why I said at the beginning of the show, we intend to be pretty aggressive at the summit of saying, now's the time. And to give everybody the confidence of it's no longer I'll stand back and wait and see, but now's the time.
I think the transition is happening not just to us, it's happening to the C-suite as well. And I think the probability of finding what I call the enlightened owner, who isn't really interested in just tipping dinosaurs, he's just interested in doing it and making sure that it can work. I think that opportunity is there. And if I go back to my history of, basically the DDC story, the IP story, all of those, it was the enlightened owner that dragged us through. So we all have to find that enlightened owner. And I don't think that's that hard. I think we have a compelling story. I think they're listening to it, and we just need to help them connect the dots. So, and I think we've got to take that story to the top. And because if you've got a traditional consultant telling that story, it's not going to go well. I'll trust me on that, unless they're an enlightened consultant, which there are a few of those, but they're few and far between.
I think this is Keith. I think we're in charge of that. I think we're the ones that are going to drive the disruption because we choose to. The owner really has no choice in how we engage. And I'll give you a real world example. We talk about the transition from ArcNet and everything else to IP and the internet. I had a great lunch with Anno on Friday, and we just talked about old times. I never realized how much we had in common in past projects, but I remember it was 1993, and I flew to Australia to check out what was going on. And, Anto, certainly you were involved. Ken, you remember the DPS, Honeywell Bull DPS, level 6 computer. I was amazed when I went to Australia and checked out the Parliament building, which happened to be, I guess, Anno's project. They were hanging, this was a Honeywell system, Australia, and they were hanging fire life safety panels, elevators or lifts that they called them, the automation system, all that stuff was hanging off of Ethernet. And this was 1993, years before the automation system companies got forced to adopt Ethernet as their backbone for their BAS systems. Anno didn't ask permission from the owner. In fact, the owner had to take what Anno spec'd in his project at Honeywell. So fast forward to 2025, we're not going to play this convoluted, overcomplicated game as far as connectivity and stuff is going on. Like when I installed my wife's Epson printer last week, there wasn't a 30-page driver manual or configuration manual. And yeah, we're not going to market like that anymore. Our drivers are plug and play. There's no tuning parameters, you know, there's no tritium tuning parameters. We don't have to sit there and babysit it. You just plug the darn thing in and it works. So that's how we're changing things. We're going to change the engagement model. We had a partner ask for a copy of our configuration manual for our new Danfoss gateway. No, the answer is no. There is no driver manual. Why would you need that? It's a stupid driver.
Keith, I agree with you, and I think there's, you see, the owners of that, I think, know what their outcome was. You know, they know what they want. They know they want a building that runs, you know, operationally efficient. They may want to be able to connect things together, but they don't actually know, you know, the fundamentals underneath, what's got to be done with it. And I think we underestimate our own ability as an industry to actually, you know, rise to the challenge of new technology. It might take us a little while, but we get there. And I think that, you know, as the kind of MSI role has grown, that's traditionally come out of an SI moving up, helping the owners and other people actually get what they want, because they're bridging that gap between the, you know, the fundamental stuff that's going on site and helping the owner or the customer get what he wants as an outcome. And I think, you know, where AI to me will have its biggest impact will be for the FM guys. You know, they're going to have to get up and do something with this, because if the data's up there and there's all these services being applied, in a lot of instances it goes through the FM people, and they're going to have to start, you know, on the bigger organizations and operations, going to actually need to embrace it a lot more, which I think they are doing, but they've still got some challenges yet in the way they go to market. But I think ultimately what that will do is, as that MSI role grows, and it's going to come out of, as I say, everybody who's already in the industry, I think it might help attract people into it as well, because you're touching both worlds from a practical perspective, but also from a technology perspective. And I think I have a great belief in the ability of the people in our industry to actually provide that drive that you were talking about, Keith.
I think there's another thing that's happening here is that I'm just in the throes of bringing online a new Google phone, and the phone is teaching me. It's talking to me. It's just like, talk to me, tell me what it is, and I'll talk back to you and tell you what you need to know. That is a piece. Another piece that is, I think, important to our industry is pushing this AI into an end device, into a device, is interesting, because it then allows the language model to be part of that device. For example, I have in my little device over 100,000 emails, because I never throw anything away. And now I can unleash AI on my emails and start pulling data that I was never able to pull before. That intrigues me. And we need to think more like that our devices need to talk to us and basically create value as we buy them. And then the C-suite will be quickly forced into a situation that I have all of these interactive devices that are calling for an IBB.
But the changes, these kind of changes from the technology, from let's say the bottom up, is very different in nature to a policy change from C-suite that says something like, thou shalt use open source, so it's okay to use open source, or information is the most important thing in my assets. Those are kind of two very different sort of approaches, and I'm wondering if which one is better for us, or maybe both. We just have to understand both and acknowledge that things happen from both ends.
That was the levels I was talking about. That is how it has to be. You've got to have a multi-layer pitch that's all aiming at the same thing, which is benefit to the organization. And you got to ask the person, are you the leader of the organization, or are you trying to influence the leader of an organization? And then we know how to talk based on their response to that. And one of the things that I hear frequently is, how can we get everyone to do this? We don't have to get everyone to do this. We've got to get a few leaders. We got to understand the adoption curve. We've got to get some people who are going to be first and represent this and help us establish the pilots that will then allow us to get more and more. So it doesn't have to be to everyone. We just all want to come away with one really good follow-up meeting out of this event.
How do we get people in the C-suite to care about assets at all, Mike? Rather than just
they care about assets already. We don't have to do that. Do you want to get full value out of your assets? Everyone's going to say yes.
but are they going to do it? If I were running a railroad, or if I were
Some
running
of
a
them won't.
business, or if I were
Look at the
running a
world.
city.
Look at the world. Some of them don't. Some of them do a horrible
Yeah.
job. Our bridges fall down and kill people.
Exactly what I was going to say. Everyone wants to build a new bridge. Nobody wants to maintain an existing one. So we've
Again,
got
you're talking
fundamental
about changing
problem.
all of human behavior. We don't need to do that. We need to
How do we
through to
even
one
identify?
person.
Yeah, how do we identify those people that care about the bridge falling down rather than building a new
Do
one?
you want transformational change at your organization? If you don't want transformational change at your organization, let's talk about the football game.
Mhm.
You make it seem like, what you got is something special. This is just salesmanship.
Mhm.
You get people
So-
interested. Comedy.
So Rick used the term earlier when he was speaking about the changes that's going on, and he was referring to what's going on with Linux and open source. But I think he's talking broader. He said that the changes are big enough now to make it matter, and to the C-suite is what I'm assuming. Is that where we are? Are the changes big enough so they it can't be ignored by the C-suite, and it's just a question of making it visible?
For early adapters, yes.
But into the main market, because early adopters
Can't
great, but
get
big
into
enough.
the main market until you get early adapters first.
We have early adopters, and we have to be able to quantify if we can quantify what they are realizing, that's the key. And that we've been trapped in this messaging of energy. We're the energy managers. And that has actually, to the point Jim's made often, energy is the last thing anybody thinks about. And it's so small. And, Ken has been around for 70 years 50 years in the industry. It didn't used to be, nobody ever built a building to save energy. Nobody ever put in, the point that we've been trapped in has been energy, and that's a tiny sliver, and it's really not that important. Now we're in the business of asset management, asset optimization, and that is a much bigger number. And what people have invested in their real estate, whether they know it or not, the inefficiency that's trapped in there right now that can now be released with AI, IBB, new technology, that is a much bigger number. And that's why I keep talking about $10 a square foot, because that's the inefficiency that most organizations have right now. Now, the problem is they don't know how many square feet they've got.
Yeah.
But if you help them figure out, instead of saving them 20 cents of energy, you're saving them $10 of efficiency on their overall total cost of ownership of their asset. Yeah, it's a big deal now.
Tracy, you were gonna jump in earlier.
Yeah, I've been listening to all this, and there's a couple things that come to mind. The first one is everything starts with a sale, right? And a sale happens when the value outweighs the cost. And we're really at the stage of convincing people that the value of all of this outweighs the cost. And guarantee that when we don't move something forward, when we don't move the cheese forward, it's because somebody doesn't believe the value outweighs the cost of this, right? So we need to remember that we're at that phase where we're still quote unquote selling. We're still convincing and showing and educating people the value outweighs the cost, to your point, Rick.
But there's also a sort of an element of risk in the middle of all that. There's cost plus the risk, right?
There's always a risk multiplier on that causes somebody to move faster or slower on that whole thing, right? And probably could argue there's risks if you do, and there's risks if you don't move forward on this whole thing. And then the second thought that I had in kind of listening to some of what Mike was talking about, that we have to remember that this doesn't have to be a jump completely into the ocean all at once for people. There is an evolutionary component to this and a revolutionary component to this. And there are a lot of people who will move through this slowly. Over the holidays, I played golf with a CEO of a PE company, about a $500 million company, owns, I don't know, the part he manages is about a dozen different manufacturing companies. And we got to talking about even simple AI, and he was so clueless. He didn't know how to log into ChatGPT or hardly what it was or what it was capable of or anything. And I got to talking to him, and by the time we were through lunch, he realized that, he could put in all of the drawings and processes in their manufacturing and how they create and build different parts for airplanes, and teach this thing how to do it faster, better, more efficiently, critique things on what they're doing. He had no clue that we were already there. And it could, he could start doing that literally, this week.
So we need to play golf with people?
Well, we were on vacation. It's somebody that I know, and it was just an interesting side journey discussion on vacation, of all things to have. But it opened my eyes about how much further like this group is in terms of understanding what the potential is, likely, than the general population, right? Here's a guy who's making decisions on, I don't know how many facilities altogether. I would guess probably well over 100 different facilities that he manages. Some very large ones and some, smaller, more moderate things, all manufacturing facilities, with no clue how to even begin getting value out of AI. Just still a little in the, I'm afraid it's going to take over the world thinking, So there's still quite a gap here, and it's all about getting the word out in education and, pulling people through the muck here to the other side.
So, Steve, do you think we're at the point where we are getting to big enough to matter, not just the AI component, but the AI component and all of the other things that sort of supplement it from our perspective?
That we're big enough to matter to whom? To the C-suite?
Yeah.
No,
in terms of the potential impact, not the understanding.
Yeah,
The understanding is really what Tracy was talking about,
right.
but the impact of what can be done between AI and all of this sort of the adoption of this new technology that we've been talking about.
So I guess I'm very intrigued, Rick, with how you came up with the $10 per square foot, because that is a powerful argument if we can demonstrate it. You know, as opposed to, you know, saving 20% of your energy. But I would say from a technology standpoint, as much as we're talking this all out and we made obviously quite a bit of investment into the IBB and now the Lennox Foundation and all of that discussion. It's still very early in terms of maturity, right? So we're really you know, early adopter in the early adopter phase, really, because we haven't matured it to the point where we're ready to go mainstream. So, but we're trying to get, I feel like we're trying to get enough momentum here to get the industry to take what we have been doing seriously so that they'll participate, right? Because, you know, in our previous discussions about C4SB and the Lennox Foundation, there's going to be a need, Rick, to get major participants to pony up money to fund a lot of this adoption, correct? Yeah, right. So let's not forget that. And because it's not just about having good ideas. To make it real, we're going to have to get participants to start writing, you know, industry participants, developers, manufacturers, service providers, to start writing checks to show their willingness to get on board with this so that their R&D teams start to align themselves with the path we're suggesting, right? And so I think we got a lot of work to do there, from what I can tell, to make that real. But if we're successful, then I think the ideas are solid. I think I don't think there's any question about that. And I think, you know, being able to leverage AI the way it's evolving right now. I'm shocked, Tracy, with the guy you met at this stage to be running manufacturing businesses and not seeing what's possible with AI. I'm stunned to hear that, because that's the segment I would have thought would have been leaders in adopting AI.
And this is advanced manufacturing for avionic applications.
Wow.
It isn't making toasters or.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. I'm stunned. Yeah.
Okay.
Rick,
Sorry, I just want to blurt in here because I just posted a post on chat here, came across my desk this morning that surprised me, is UNESCO dedicates the International Day of Education to artificial intelligence. That's a big statement. There's a lot of change going on on everybody's mind. And you're quite right. I too have run into people like Tracy's friend there that are just totally out of touch with what this is and what the change is. And typically they're of my age. My age is really bad. As I keep getting younger, it gets a little better, although they all have different attitudes about it as well. But the bottom line is change is in the air. So I think you just have to make them aware of that. But UNESCO, you know, that's a move on a pretty significant level. So that'll start to educate, you know, people that don't necessarily look at our industry, they look at the world. I also think the devices in their hands will change them. Once you start using AI in a phone application, just it's what your friend can do that you can't do. You know, they can't do a 3D picture, they can't do this, they can't do that. That motivates them. And all the way through my 50 years, it was when we first in DDC, we needed to use computers to back up the systems. We often would buy the CEO a computer we called them programming tools because we weren't allowed to buy computers in the old days. And we called them programming tools, and we would give the CEO a programming tool, although he never had any intention of ever programming anything. He just wanted one of them new personal computers. And I think it's just that is the way the changes occur. It is, they see the technology, they touch the technology, it's real, it's amazing. And the other thing, Keith did some good posts on how the AI is doing a whole bunch of things that no one person will or will never do. He said it's not should do, could do, they just can't do it because AI is the only thing that has the patience and the detail to kind of dig into these databases and actually pull value out of them.
Well, yeah, thank you, Ken. I mean, I saw that movie Imitation Game with about Alan Turing, and everybody knows he's the guy that cracked Enigma. He didn't crack Enigma. His first computer, electromechanical computer named Christopher, cracked Enigma. When he first arrived at that Manhattan Project of this thing was saved thousands of lives. And I mean, we don't know how the greatest impact, and he invented the first computer, but he thought it was absolutely absurd when this thing has 195 million different settings per day. And they had these chess players and academics and stuff with a pencil and paper. He's like, this is absurd. I have to build, well, this is a machine we're up against. So I have to build a machine to crack the machine. And that's how the first computer was built. It couldn't be solved without the computer.
So we need to bring this, we need to wrap this because we've gone past the top of the hour. This is good conversation. I think with yeah, we'll continue this next week for at least one more.
Can I just really quickly say
wrap it up.
something? You guys are there. You have the benefit. You don't need to sell anything. You need to identify people who understand what you're saying and forget everybody else. You've got it. There's no question about it. AI helps what you're doing. You don't need to focus about AI. Stay focused on what you're doing. What you're doing is great.
Right.
Amen.
With that, we'll wrap it. Thank you for those words, Mike. We'll get a video out on YouTube in the next couple of days, and hope you all have a great cold week. It's cold for most of the country, and see you next week. Bye all.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.